Then I looked up, dried myself, and yelled. I wasn't standing in a mirror. There was a dog. That is, it was me, but with the head of a dog. It was some kind of black shepherd. Her eyes were looking right at me. I looked at my hands and noticed that I had grown a little fur, and I felt sick. I looked at myself again and remembered the soup. Greetings to all. How are you? I have a funny story that I want to share with your friends. To begin with, I would like to note all the same the great power of winding. Probably every one of you has ever done this. I think it's called psychosomatics. In general, not the point. Now you will see and hear everything. But for now, sit down, watch, and do not forget to put likes, write comments, and subscribe to the channel. By the way, yes, my name is Norman. Once my friend Neil and I were sitting at home and just dying of bored. At some point, Neil screamed. I was already scared. I thought that something might have happened, but my dear friend came up with an argument. Yes, he loved all sorts of arguments. He is always quite gambling. I don't encourage his addiction, but if his idea is fun, then why not? He offered me a mini exercise competition. That is, who will run faster, swim, bend higher, and all that. He wrote down the tasks that the loser would have to complete. I roughly imagined that the tasks would be crazy. In general, yes, we chose the day, discussed the place, gathered other friends. Only I agreed to participate. Others did not trust Neil. Well, they did the right thing. We prepared everything we needed. Neil's girlfriend was the judge and we started. In fact, performing such simple competitions turned out to be much more fun than it seemed. It's been a long time since we frolicked and raged like this since we were older. I realized that I was in bad physical shape when I couldn't run the 100-meter distance faster than Neil. I was far behind, and this was my first loss. However, then I succeeded in swimming, so Neil lost. I also won the long jump, surprisingly, and the most recent task, the pull-up on the rope, was won again by Neil. The score was 2-2, as if there were no losers, which meant that we divide the tasks in half. I was the first to pull out 2 pieces of paper, and Neil took the rest. My first task was to kiss the first grandmother I met. Oh shit, I thought, this is terrible. Everyone laughed, but a loss is a loss. We went down the street in a crowd, and I saw our neighbor, Mrs. Nelson, there. Damn, I didn't want to do that. She just loved kissing everyone. And it always left a wet mark on cheek. I went up to her and kissed her as if to say hello, but it was not clear who else kissed whom. She probably didn't let me go for 2 minutes. It was terrible. I began to dry off, wished her a good day, and we left. Neil, in turn, opened his task. He had to run naked down the street. Dude, what are your tasks so vulgar? I asked him. He just smiled broadly at me in response, immediately took off his pants and ran. All our guys were yelling, filming him and laughing loudly, and I couldn't believe that I was friends with him. After running a lap, he came back to us, dressed, and immediately opened the second task. He had to steal apples from the garden of our neighbor, Mr. Charles. Oh no, you just don't know him. He's a beast. He was so angry that he yelled whenever we accidentally stepped on his lawn, stroked his dog, or just looked out the window. But all neighbors knew that he had a gorgeous garden with beautiful apples in his backyard, and he never treated anyone. So to steal the apples from his garden was to risk his life. But Neil is not a simple guy. He adjusted his caps and moved towards the neighbor's yard. We were there in 10 minutes. At lunchtime, our neighbor was almost always asleep, so we sneaked into his house. I was on the lookout, and Neil climbed over the fence and ran to pick apples. After a couple of minutes, he threw us about 7 apples and climbed the fence himself. At that moment, he heard a shot. Oh my god, we were so scared, but our neighbor was shooting blanks to scare us off. We somehow gathered fruit, and ran away from there so that the heels sparkled, and then there was my last task. It was quite unusual. I had to try the dog soup. Ugh, what a mess. Neil, how could you? I asked him. He just laughed. He told me that he just almost lost his life while picking apples, and I'm like, can't I try some soup? I was embarrassed. I asked where I would do it, and he said that there is a Korean neighborhood with restaurants behind our block. We agreed to meet him there together and went there in the evening for dinner. As soon as we entered, an unfamiliar smell hit our nostrils, and a young waitress came up to us and brought us a menu. Neil immediately asked her to bring the dog soup, and she nodded politely. To be honest, I was very uneasy, because I had never eaten a dog before in my life and could not even imagine that they were eaten. And Neil, it turns out, had noticed this restaurant for a long time and did not know how to get me there. So you made all this up just to eat it here? And he was like, I know you wouldn't have agreed otherwise. I asked, but how did you know that I would lose and choose this particular task? To which my friend replied, I didn't know, but even if I lost, you would still come with me to make sure. This would be my cunning and devious friend. When the order was brought to us, I was surprised. A deep bowl was placed on the table with the most ordinary meat broth at first glance. It was served with boiled rice, a lot of herbs, garlic, salt, pepper, chopped onions, and a lot of red pepper mixed into a mush. I didn't even know how to eat it, and the waitress did everything herself. She just mixed all the ingredients in one bowl and it's done. Neil ordered one of those too, and repeated it. I didn't even realize right away that meat was dog meat. In appearance, the most simple boiled meat. Hesitantly, I scooped up the first spoonful and tasted quite a bit. It was not bad, quite delicious. And then I realized that if you don't think about who you're eating, it's delicious. Neil and I ate everything in 10 minutes, and a pleasant warmth spread throughout my body. I made my friend promise that he would never tell anyone about this. He agreed, but asked me to come here more often now, because he wants to try many other dishes. I came home full, tried not to think about who I had eaten, but nevertheless, I did my controversial duty. The next morning I woke up in the middle of the night, covered in sweat. I looked around and saw that the clock is still 3 a.m., and I somehow feel uneasy. I got out of bed and went to wash, turned on the water, washed, and somehow felt strange. Then I looked up, dried myself, and yelled. I wasn't standing in a mirror. There was a dog. That is, it was me, but with the head of a dog. It was some kind of black shepherd. Her eyes were looking right at me. I looked at my hands and noticed that I had grown a little fur, and I felt sick. I looked at myself again and remembered the soup. I immediately ran back into the room, took out the phone, and immediately began to dial Neil. Do you know what time it is? He asked, and I tell him that I have become a dog, but he does not understand. And then I realized that I wasn't talking, but barking. Hello? Is this a joke? Dude, you got yourself a dog or something? Hello? My friend asked, and I was completely scared. After I hung up, I sat on the bed and again began feeling his face. Then there was a knock in the room. I wanted to say don't come in, and barked again. My mother came into the room. She'll scream at the sight of me. I ran up to her, but she didn't fall to the ground. I wanted to say something to her, but I just barked and barked. Damn, why did I eat this soup? There is really something about him. Why did I become a dog and Neil didn't? Why is this happening? I thought, and tried to help my mother. She screamed and then fainted. I tried to call the ambulance again, but this time my fingers wouldn't work. It seemed to me that everything was over. This is some kind of nonsense. Then I heard my mother's voice again. Norman, get up. I asked her, what's Mom? Are you feeling better? And she said to me again, get up, you'll oversleep. Norman, she shouted, and I opened my eyes. Suddenly I saw my mother walking around the room, opening the curtains, and I was lying in bed. After a few seconds, I got up and ran to the mirror. Oh yes, thank God it was a dream. Hooray, I said under my breath. My mother asked me what was wrong, and I smiled at her and asked her to make me some coffee. She came down the stairs. It was a good thing it was only a dream. Then I got a text from Neil. Dude, are you up? Everything is normal? I replied that now yes, and then I get a message. And you called me yesterday and barked several times. Did you buy a dog? He wrote to me, and my skin crawled again.
What do you know about arguments and excitement? I think I know almost everything. My name is Milana, and I was born in Las Vegas. Even my place of birth speaks for itself. Excitement is in my blood. My parents met during a game of poker. My father was a player, and my mother was the one who dealt the cards. She was working in a casino at the time. Dad won many times and then lost, and after each loss came to take revenge. So they flirted with each other for about a couple of weeks, and then he finally decided to ask her out. 6 months later, they were married at the same casino where my mother worked. Over time, father got a job there in order to simultaneously protect her from other men's bribes. My mother was a prominent one, so we always had playing cards in the house, unnecessary chips. I remember when I was growing up, my mom and dad always played together in the evenings and taught me. When I was 6 years old, I was a master at playing cards. When I was 8, I played with my parents and even won sometimes. I liked the feeling of victory. It was also interesting to plunge into the game. You never know what is waiting for you, and it was fascinating. Well, the coolest thing started when I entered school. Oh, how many times my parents were called because I was playing in the back. But I was interested in watching the surprised faces of my classmates. They were so attentive to my hands, to the tricks that I learned to do with cards. After school, we chose a place in the park, Square Park, and I just played. Or rather, I taught the children how to lay out cards, cheat unnoticeably, and place bets based on the behavior and condition of the player. Well, I couldn't help it. This attention that I received from the environment was too sweet, and over time, I got used to it. I was like the card queen of the class. There was no one who could surpass my skill in sleight of hand. However, this did not last long. My crown was removed from my head by our new classmate. He came in the middle of the year, moved with his parents from another city. When I started to lay out the next set of cards, he came up to us at recess and stared at my hands. I noticed it, and I thought, am I just imagining it? But I wasn't. In just a fraction of a second, he snatched the cards out of my hands and began almost juggling them, performing tricks that I'm still trying to learn. Oh, he's a scoundrel. Before my eyes and in the eyes of my classmates, my authority was failing. Now the title of the best is no longer mine, and I was not worthy. I was so angry, but I didn't even know his name. So I snatched my deck out of his hands and told him to go to hell. I came home in a bad mood. I was very angry with him. Why did this happen? What the hell? Why was he in my class? How do I use my fame now? I spent the whole evening complaining about it to my mother, and she just laughed and then advised me to have a fair fight for the title of the card leader in the class. I didn't immediately understand what that meant. My mother explained that if I do not want to fall face down in the dirt in front of the guys, I must prove not only the skill of sleight of hand, I must also prove that I also have a character of steel, that I am not afraid of competition, and I do not perceive defeat as anything but a springboard to the sky. Yes, it's decided. I will fight tomorrow. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, carefully selected my wardrobe, and went to school determined. I brought my best deck of cards, which my father gave me. They were the first in my life and always brought good luck. After school, I suggested that Maximilian, as he was called, play a game of 21, and he agreed. We met in the park, and our classmates gathered around us. It was quite a sight for them. I've never been so nervous before a game as I was that time. What do you think? I started losing right away. I demanded revenge again and again, and I was unlucky. I already thought that maybe he was cheating, but no matter how hard I tried to see his face, mood, and facial expressions, everything seemed to be clear. This can't be happening, I shouted, throwing my cards on the ground. I was so angry that I could have kicked him in the face. We played for hours on end. My hands were already cramping and my head was aching from the exertion. I couldn't believe I was losing to Maximilian. It wasn't my day. I took my bag and went home angry. My mother listened to my emotional story and said that with such strong enemies, it is better to stay close, so it will be more useful to be his friend. But I wasn't going to be friends with someone who had trampled on my reputation. All the next day at school, I didn't talk to anyone, much less look in Maximilian's direction. I was disgusted by him. But suddenly, he came up to me during lunch and offered to eat at the diner after school. He must be up to something, I thought. I was about to tell him to go away, but I suddenly remembered my mother's advice about enemies. Okay, I told him. As agreed, I met with him after class. Max immediately started with a case. I know you're mad at me. You were the best card player here before I came along. But I didn't play you on purpose. It's just the way I am. I play well, and you make a few mistakes. I don't want to compete with you, but if you want to prove your coolness, let's choose a neutral battlefield. Let the guys come up with tests for us, and we will pass them, he said. I sipped my milkshake and knew he was right. That's what I needed. I agreed, and we agreed with our classmates to go camping next weekend. Our classmates tried hard enough. They came up with such crazy tasks that some of them wanted to scream with fear. Marguerite came up with a competition to see who could drink a liter of water faster. Mark gave us a speed run. Donna came up with chemistry and math problems, and Trinity asked us to sing a song. Let's take a bet. Who will eat a kilo of worms? George asked us. Max just frowned. The score was the same, So it was the last and decisive contest. I couldn't back down, and my blood was racing. I shouted, trying not to imagine what was waiting for me. Maximilian looked at me, as did all the other boys, with great surprise. "Look, you don't have to do this. I've already realized that you are a stubborn person," Maximilian said. "But I gave my word and I had to keep it." Then George handed me a kilo of jelly worms and said, "You win." Oh, yes! I won! It was a contest for stubbornness and fortitude. I made it! Everyone was laughing at George's great prank, and Max shook my hand. I was happy and finally calmed down. All in all, it was just a crazy day. And since then, Max and I have become friends because we have so many interests in common, right?